In Genesis, God creates man and woman. And in Genesis 2, God creates marriage. And he says the two shall now become one. And that is a picture of relationships. God is trying to teach us of what relationships are to look like, what our relationship with each other is to look like, what our relationship with him is to look like. It's a picture of our life with God, and it's a picture of our life with each other. And it's really to help us understand the beauty in relationships, the beauty in unity, in love, and in sacrifice. So what happens when that picture is broken for us? What do we do when we live in a world that 1 out of every 2 marriages is failing? And what do we do when it's our marriage that's failing?
Growing up, I feel like it was a distorted view on marriage that I had because my parents didn't really model a good relationship.
So we had been together about 9 years. If we're being honest, the real reason why I proposed is because, one, there was a lot of pressure from just family and friends because we had been together so long, and it was just the next logical step of what somebody does in a long-term relationship. And two, it had basically been that long that it was either now or never type of deal. And it wasn't an ultimatum or anything. It just felt like this is the time to do it. We were both, I believe, I don't know if Cindy would agree, that we were pretty selfish individuals. Mm-hmm. So we kind of saw the premarital counseling as just a hoop that we had to jump through to get to the wedding, because my brother only agreed to marry us if we did that counseling.
I don't know that we had an expectation of what marriage was. It was just, we knew that, we cared for each other. We love each other so much that, this is the next step that we needed to take, because we knew we were going to spend the rest of our lives together. But I didn't think anything would change. It was just going to be, he's going to work, I'm going to work, family not at the top of my list. I knew that it was, inching higher on his list, but I just felt like, okay, we will cross that bridge when we get there. And so we really never discussed what's going to happen once we have kids and what that entailed. We were just more focused on ourselves and going about our own business. And unfortunately, that was a problem. I wanted him to, support me emotionally. When that wasn't happening, I just felt very isolated and started to just resent him for it. And I just wanted him to love me, and I just wanted to be comforted, and that wasn't happening.
I think that void kind of resonated in both of our hearts, and we just kind of finally confronted it at some point, and we just said, what are we doing here? We're in this marriage, but we're not really together. We're not really connected. We're not really there for each other. And in all honesty, we're not really happy.
Yeah.
So at that point, we kind of decided, let's take a break, let's separate, and just see how things shake out. Well, as we were separated, like I said, we were living our own lives independently with no real certainty as far as getting back together. And it was during that period where we did eventually kind of come together, and we decided that, yes, we had our time apart, but no, we don't feel like we need to continue this, because the feelings of resentment and the void and just the hurt and the anger and the disappointment were still there. So we basically decided, we've reached that point that we've agreed to get a divorce.
And so when I found myself alone, there was no one there that I could, place the blame on or reach out to, help me. And so I had to figure it out. I was embarrassed at the fact that, I'm not even 30 and I'm already going to have divorce under my belt. I started reading self-help books and seeing okay, well, maybe this is a quick fix that I need to, just get me through to, be happy. I didn't feel like there was any hope for our marriage. I just felt like, we had signed our papers. We were it was going to be an easy divorce. And a friend of mine had been inviting me to go to this encounter at her church. And I was like, what are you talking about? When I went to my encounter, I remember going to one of the servers and just asking for guidance. Like, I need clarification. Like, this is what's going on. My husband and I have filed for divorce. It's all said and done. The only thing is I don't have my actual papers. So like, help me. And so she was like, no, she's like, you're still married until, you get that piece of paper saying that you're divorced. So I got a lot of clarity at the encounter in terms of what marriage was and my role as the wife. And I realized, man, I messed up. I messed up big time. And now I can't fix that.
So we signed our divorce papers in approximately October of 2011. And I went on my own way and she went on her own way. She was going to the encounter. I was going to a deep, dark place myself where I just kind of upped my sin game to the next level. For me, there was no hope for our marriage. I mean, there was zero chance of it ever reconnecting, ever getting back together. We had signed the divorce papers, so once they were filed with the court, I kind of put it in the back of my mind. I knew that the divorce would be final a few months later, but in my mind, I was already single. I'll never forget, it was a morning in November of 2011. I was laying in bed on a Saturday morning, and God knows what I had done the night before. I had probably been up very late. I just remember being woken up by the voice of God. I had heard God try to speak to me before through my family members that were believers and others that had tried to get me back into the church because I was raised in a godly home and was raised Christian and attended church regularly. But somewhere in high school, I just fell out of church and fell into the world. So I had never really responded to those calls from God. But this morning in November of 2011 was different. I heard God's voice loud and clear, and he basically told me two things. I want you to come home to me, and two, I want you to fix your marriage. So he calls me, and I had been praying for him this entire time, that God would just soften his heart, that just, that God would reveal to him, reveal himself to John, to give him the guidance that he needed. There was a lot of emotional honesty for the first time where we kind of had to at least try to figure out where we had gone wrong and where we wanted to go. I went to the court and I filed papers to revoke the divorce, and through the grace of God, I was able to do that 1 week before it was to become final. So to us, that was kind of a sign from God that, this is my stamp of blessing on your marriage.
I felt like for the first time we were finally on the same page. We knew that we wanted to be together, that we wanted to restore our marriage. The big difference in our relationship now is that we have God at the center.
Once we both became believers and once we both, really worked to restore our marriage, everything wasn't all, peaches and cream. It was still a lot of work. We still went through a lot of trials. I can remember probably the biggest trial we went through was once we did get back together, we really were both on the same page for the first time about starting a family. And we were both excited about it. And we both, we tried for a very long time to get pregnant, and we just couldn't. And we tried and we tried, and every month when we found out, we were just so hurt and so disappointed, and we just really relied on God, something we would have never done before. I feel like in the prior context of our marriage, that would have been something that drove us apart. But in this instance, we really just relied on God. We prayed to him, we put it in his hands, and we just put our hope in him. Eventually, we found out we were blessed, and I'm doubly blessed because we found out Cindy was pregnant with twins. I'm John.
And I'm Cindy, and our hope is in Jesus.
Jesus is the restorer of dead things. Throughout the scriptures, we see God raising things that were presumed all but dead. We see this in some of the greatest figures throughout the scriptures. We see David, where he's at a point in his life where he's lost everything and he goes into a cave to die. But God resurrects David's life, the vision for his life, and brings it to fruition and gives him life. And we see this in Jesus' ministry too. There's one point where Jesus comes across a man named Jairus, and his daughter has died. And Jesus walks into that house and brings life to that house by bringing her back to life. And then most people know the story of Lazarus, Jesus' good friend who has died, and Jesus raises him to life from death. And then Jesus himself, the end of his ministry, he's put on a cross and he dies for your sins and mine. And his lifeless body is put in a tomb. And we all know 3 days later, God brings Jesus back to life. You see, Jesus is the restorer of dead things. So whether your marriage is on the rocks, have hope that you have a God who raises things from the dead. Or maybe your marriage is past that point. Maybe your marriage is failing. Have hope. Take courage that you have a God who raises things from the dead. Or maybe you're divorced already and that ship has sailed. And with that divorce, your hopes and your dreams have died. You too, take hope that you have a God who raises things from the dead. And 2 Corinthians 4 says, "For God who said, 'Let light shine out of darkness,' made his light shine in our hearts to give us the light of the knowledge of God's glory displayed in the face of Christ." God who brings light out of darkness. And then it goes on to say in that chapter, "But we have this treasure in jars of clay to show that this all-surpassing power is from God and not from us. And we are hard-pressed on every side, but not crushed, perplexed, but not in despair, persecuted, but not abandoned, struck down, but not destroyed. We always carry around in our body the death of Jesus, so that the life of Jesus may also be revealed in our body." The God who brings light out of darkness, that's the God who you serve. That's the God who is with you at the darkest times. And the beauty about that is his light shines brightest when it is the darkest. So if you are in a dark place, I want to encourage you to draw near to him. Draw near to the one who not only has light that shines in the darkness, but whose light has overcome the darkness. Hold on to him. Hold on to his promises. Hold on to him knowing that he will walk with you every step of the way, that he will never let go. Hold on to him because you know with him, you're going to be okay. You're going to get through this with him by your side. Hold on to his promises, his future promises, like in Revelation 21:4, where we know ultimately he's going to restore all things. That he's going to wipe away every tear from our eyes, because there will be no more death. There will be no more pain. There will be no more heartache. There will be no more divorce. Jesus brings dead things to life, and he is still in the resurrecting business.